In order to secure a future for her unborn child, she took advantage of a blind date to force an honest man from the village to accept her. 5 months later, she gave birth to a healthy and lively baby, and then, with rightful reason, demanded that the man take responsibility. Driven by a sense of duty, the man willingly married the girl. But married life was not as blissful as Frank had imagined. His wife, Mandy, not only refused to take on the responsibilities of a housewife, but dressed up extravagantly every day, leaving early and returning late, and often didn't come home at all. This left him with an indescribable confusion and sense of loss. Frank began to suspect that this woman was not as well behaved as he had thought. Finally, one night, Frank gathered his courage and quietly followed her. Sure enough, he discovered the disgraceful things she had been doing outside. Even when the truth was laid bare, Mandy showed no trace of guilt. Instead, her face was filled with indifference and contempt. Frank's dignity was trampled. In a fit of rage, he lost control and pushed his wife to the ground. Perhaps it was her karma. Mandy died on the spot after hitting the back of her head. Before Frank could come to his senses, a drop of water suddenly landed on Mandy's forehead. He jolted awake and remembered the child he had forgotten in the bathtub. In a panic, he rushed upstairs to save the baby. But it was already too late. The child had tragically drowned in the tub. Frank was charged with the crime of killing his wife and child and sentenced to 25 years in prison. 5 years later, he escaped during an appendectomy. To evade police pursuit, Frank held a young boy hostage at a convenience store and used him as leverage for his escape. Frank brought the boy to his mother, threatening her with the child's safety and forcing her to drive him home immediately. Out of concern for her son's safety, Adele complied with Frank's demand. Perhaps she had already guessed that Frank was the fugitive being reported on the news, as she remained silent and tense throughout the ride. Even when they passed a police car head-on, she didn't dare make a move, because her son Henry was the only emotional anchor she had left in this painful world. Adele didn't know what Frank's true intentions were, but as long as she could keep her son safe, she was willing to sacrifice anything, even her life. Perhaps sensing the woman's genuine love for her child, Frank didn't make things difficult for them once they arrived home. In a gentle tone, he explained that he was not a violent person and would never hurt anyone. He just needed a place to rest and would leave after nightfall. But to avoid dragging Adele and her son into trouble, Frank said he had to pretend to tie Adele up with rope. Even though they still had lingering fears in their hearts, the mother and son had no choice but to comply. Yet while tying her up, Frank was incredibly gentle, careful not to cause Adele any unnecessary harm. Perhaps to fill their stomachs, or maybe to thank them for cooperating, Frank went into the kitchen to prepare lunch for them. Since Adele's hands were tied, Frank thoughtfully blew on each spoonful of food and gently fed it to her mouth. Looking at the kind and caring man before her, Adele could hardly believe that he was actually a fugitive on the run. Henry, watching from the side, also felt puzzled. Perhaps this man wasn't as vicious and dangerous as the television said. As night fell, Frank untied Adele. He intended to leave under the cover of darkness, but just then the sound of police sirens echoed outside. It seemed the police had increased patrols, leaving Frank with no choice but to stay and wait for another opportunity. The next morning, while Adele and her son were still sound asleep, Frank had already prepared breakfast for them. The delicious food not only awakened their taste buds, but also began to soften the defenses in Henry's heart. Henry no longer looked at Frank with fear. Instead, he felt a genuine sense of admiration and respect.
How'd you escape?
I told the guard at the hospital if he left, I was going to jump out the window. He heard that. He went to have a smoke. Nothing misleads people like the truth.
Frank's tone carried a gentle authority, like a father teaching his son how to escape danger in a crisis. As their conversation deepened, Henry confided his innermost thoughts.
How does a fellow let a woman like your mother get away?
He got together with his secretary.
At that moment, Adele voluntarily took the rope and walked over, signaling for Frank to tie them up. But Frank told her it was no longer necessary. He gently explained that if he were ever arrested, the rope could help clear them of suspicion. His calm and kind demeanor caused Adele to lower her guard. Following Henry's suggestion, she picked up the breakfast Frank had made, cautiously took a bite, and slowly savored it. In that moment, a hint of tenderness flickered in her eyes. Adele couldn't believe that this rugged and untamed man could create such delicious food. To repay the mother and son for sheltering him, Frank took the initiative to handle the household chores. He cleared the leaves piled on the roof, fixed the broken steps, and even helped Henry repair Adele's beloved car. During this time, Frank seemed like a loving father, patiently teaching Henry how to be his mother's protector so that he wouldn't regret it only after it was too late. Perhaps these were life lessons born from Frank's deepest regrets. He confessed that his escape was motivated by a desire to return home and personally bury his parents, who had passed away in an accident. Every word Frank spoke felt like fresh spring water flowing into Henry's heart. For some reason, this fugitive gave him a sense of emotional connection he had always lacked. From sunrise to sunset, they worked together. During a break, Frank carefully taught Henry how to generate power while playing baseball. His serious tone was just like that of a real father coaching his son. This rare display of warmth was especially precious to Henry, who had grown up without a father figure. Hiding nearby, Adele watched this heartwarming scene unfold, and an unexpected stir of emotion rose within her. Perhaps this man wasn't so bad after all. After a brief time together, the mother and son seemed to forget that Frank was a fugitive. Adele even brought out a sewing kit and carefully mended the tear in Frank's pants, each stitch filled with unspoken care, and in this warm moment, Frank gently asked about the scar on Adele's leg. But just as the warmth in the air began to settle, a sudden knock at the door shattered the calm. Frank instinctively held Adele hostage and, in a tense and serious tone, told Henry to quickly get rid of the visitor. When Henry opened the door, he saw it was the new neighbor who had just moved in. He came to deliver some peaches to the mother and son, and took the opportunity to warn them that a murderer was on the loose nearby, urging them to be extra cautious. But despite having the perfect chance to turn Frank in, Henry remained silent and cleverly made an excuse to send the neighbor away. Only then did Frank relax, realizing the trust Henry had placed in him. He praised him in a fatherly tone, saying he had done a great job. Henry smiled, feeling proud of being recognized. And Adele, who had been quietly observing, also noticed this extraordinary moment. The feelings she had long buried began to quietly bloom. To repay Adele and her son for their trust, Frank suggested using the peaches brought by the neighbor to teach them how to make a fruit pie. This was a family recipe he had always taken great pride in, and now he was willing to share it unreservedly with those he believed were meant to receive it. In that sunlit kitchen, their figures moved harmoniously through beams of light and shadow. The way they interacted was full of warmth and joy, like a blissful family of three. Frank gently stood behind Adele, patiently guiding her through the process of kneading dough. During this intimate and close teaching moment, each fleeting glance and every accidental yet perfectly timed touch made Adele's heart unconsciously tense. This subtle emotional stir was like a warm current quietly flowing into her heart, awakening her deepest desires and making her heartbeat quicken, her body trembling slightly. Henry, silently watching from the side, also sensed the emotional ripple in his mother. Though he didn't fully understand the meaning behind those gestures, he was sure that his mother, like him, had already accepted Frank's presence from the bottom of her heart. Frank's arrival not only gave Henry a long-lost feeling of fatherly love, but also rekindled Adele's belief and hope in love itself. As the fruit pie gradually took shape in the oven, its sweet aroma began to fill every corner of the room. In this warm and cozy atmosphere, Frank gathered his courage and gently placed his hand on Adele's waist. Just as he had hoped, Adele didn't pull away. Instead, she slowly leaned into him, unable to resist. Subsequently, they couldn't help but immerse themselves in that tranquility and sweetness, unable to extricate themselves. But Frank knew that staying here would only bring the mother and son unknown troubles. As night fell and he watched the patrol cars outside fade into the distance, he realized it was a perfect opportunity to flee. Hearing this, Henry seemed as if startled from a dream, and a faint trace of disappointment appeared on Adele's face.
You should probably let your stitches heal.
You should stay.
Faced with their sincere plea, Frank felt torn and conflicted, but in the end, he chose to stay. Still, his heart was heavy with worry, uncertain if this was truly the right decision. These inner struggles and doubts became invisible chains holding him back. Even so, Frank's longing for a better life, along with a man's natural sense of duty and responsibility, slowly allowed him to integrate into this family and to accept the fact that Henry saw him as a father figure. Their lives seemed to be shifting onto a brand new path. Except for the fact that he couldn't walk hand in hand with Adele beneath the sunset, Frank had already taken on every responsibility a husband should bear. In their spare time, ballroom dancing became their way of comforting each other's souls. Those graceful steps and wordless glances became the most tender expressions of their bond. The injustice and pain of the past gradually faded from memory, transforming into the opportunity that brought them together. But Frank's identity as a fugitive added an uncertain element to this happiness, forcing them to stay constantly alert. That afternoon, their neighbor Evelyn suddenly rushed into Adele's home, begging her to look after her son Barry. Before Adele could refuse, Evelyn had already left Barry at the doorstep and hurried away. Left with no choice, Adele had to take on the responsibility. Later, Frank brought Barry to the backyard, once again taking on the role of a loving father, playing a game of baseball with the two boys. Under the blazing summer sun, their cheerful laughter felt especially heartwarming. Adele too found her long-lost smile in the midst of the laughter. At first, Barry's arrival seemed like a small, happy detour. But that evening, when Evelyn came to pick him up, a news report about Frank happened to appear on the TV. Barry looked at the photo on the screen and suddenly realized it was the same man who had been playing with him. He immediately let out a sharp screech, trying to alert his mother that the fugitive was right there. But Evelyn didn't understand his meaning. She simply assumed he wanted to keep watching television. A loud slap from Evelyn broke the tension in the room, returning a moment of calm. Still, this unexpected event left a lingering shadow in everyone's hearts. Frank knew he couldn't stay here much longer, but he couldn't bear the thought of abandoning Adele and Henry. To prevent another mishap, he and Adele began to entertain the idea of fleeing together. But before they could go, Adele needed to be sure. Could Frank truly accept the flawed version of herself? So she shared with him all the painful memories she had tried to forget. After giving birth to Henry, she had once been pregnant again, but due to a moment of carelessness, the baby died before birth. Worse still, she was left unable to bear children ever again. Henry's father couldn't accept this and eventually left her, starting a new family with his secretary. One blow after another left a dark cloud over Adele's soul, and she even sank into a deep depression. Thankfully, with Henry by her side, she found the strength to go on. So this time, leaving was her way of finally saying goodbye to the past. But deep down, Adele was still anxious, afraid that Frank wouldn't be able to accept her for who she truly was.
You already have.
Frank's words were like a perfectly placed stone, gently dropping into the closed-off lake of Adele's heart, rippling through her emotions. They not only stirred something deep within her, but like the first ray of sunlight breaking through the morning clouds, they illuminated her dark world and gave her hope for happiness. After much thought and reflection, Adele and Frank began to plan their escape in detail. Unbeknownst to them, Henry had overheard everything from behind the door. The next day, he went to the library and borrowed books, hoping to help his mother devise a better, more complete escape route. But fate always delivers its twists when least expected. At the library, Henry met a girl about his age named Eleanor. Perhaps moved by the emotions between his mother and Frank, Henry, just beginning to understand such feelings, was drawn by an unknown impulse. He couldn't help but walk over to Eleanor and nervously start a conversation. During their talk, he learned that Eleanor's parents were also divorced, and even worse, her mother's new boyfriend had kicked her out of the house, leaving her to wander in a place she barely knew. Hearing her story, Henry felt deep sympathy, and he shared the budding feelings between his mother and Frank. In that moment, their hearts found resonance on the same path shaped by fate.
I see only one hope for you. You need to find a way to get him out of your life.
I don't know if that's possible.
Either you get rid of him, or he's probably gonna get rid of you.
Eleanor's words left Henry deep in thought. When Henry returned home that evening, he found his mother dancing joyfully with Frank. She no longer seemed burdened by sorrow. Instead, she looked radiant and full of life. Overjoyed, Adele decided to confess everything to Henry.
We've decided to go together. Will I ever see you again?
What are you talking about?
Do you even care about what happens to me?
We're all going.
I would never leave you.
Henry had once believed he would suffer the same fate as Eleanor, being heartlessly abandoned by his mother. But fortunately, his mother wasn't the cold and selfish woman the world thought her to be. She would never give up the bond of blood just for her own comfort and freedom. In the end, they decided to bring Henry along and embark on this new journey together. Early the next morning, they began packing their belongings. But before leaving, Henry wished to see Eleanor one last time. First, to share the joy of not being abandoned. Second, to say goodbye to someone he cared deeply for. However, during their conversation, he accidentally let something slip. and Eleanor guessed the truth about his mother and Frank. When Henry realized his mistake, a look of panic crossed his face. Thankfully, Eleanor was kind-hearted. She promised Henry she would never tell a soul, and sealed that promise with her first kiss. Upon returning home, Henry decided to write a letter to his biological father. It was a farewell letter, free from resentment or blame. It carried only a gentle acceptance of the past and a deep longing and hope for the future. He placed the letter in a beautiful envelope, and while Frank and his mother were packing, he quietly walked to his father's house and personally slipped it into the mailbox. In that moment, Henry felt an unprecedented sense of peace and relief. But on his way home, he was spotted by a police officer who had long harbored desire for Adele. The officer ignored Henry's objections and insisted on giving him a ride home. With no other choice, Henry reluctantly got into the car. As they pulled up to the house, Adele, standing nearby, saw her son stepping out of a police vehicle and couldn't help but feel anxious. Fortunately, it turned out to be a false alarm. The officer was simply concerned for Henry's safety walking alone and wanted to remind them to be cautious, as a fugitive was reported to be nearby. At this moment, Frank, who was upstairs, also witnessed everything. He realized their time was running out. To avoid further danger, he suggested that Adele quickly go to the bank to withdraw cash. But when they arrived at the bank, they learned there was an unspoken rule. Large cash withdrawals required a legitimate reason. Faced with intense questioning, Adele became flustered and began to tremble. The bank manager soon sensed something was off. In that critical moment, Henry remembered what Frank had taught him: speak the truth in a way that misleads.
Actually, we've packed up all the things. We're emptying our bank account and then gonna make a run for the border. You know, like Bonnie and Clyde.
Sure enough, just as Frank said, the truth can often be the best disguise. Henry's response not only made the staff laugh, but also erased all their doubts. Meanwhile, back at the house, Frank, while fixing a light, was suddenly interrupted by Evelyn. In a moment of crisis, he claimed to be a repairman Adele had hired, which finally dispelled Evelyn's suspicion. After dropping off some things, Evelyn left in a hurry, but Frank wasn't sure if she had truly believed him. Soon after she left, Henry and Adele returned home, yet danger crept closer. Just as they were ready to depart, the sharp sound of police sirens pierced the air outside. In that instant, fear surged through everyone's hearts. Adele urged Frank to leave on his own, but he knew what such a departure would mean for her and Henry. He didn't want to become the kind of irresponsible man who left his family to bear the cruel consequences in his place. He pulled Adele into his arms and gently reassured her not to worry. Then, with time running out, he quickly tied Adele up again and, in a soft and loving voice, bid her a final farewell. By now, Adele was sobbing uncontrollably, watching Frank's figure disappear into the sunlight. No one knew who had revealed Frank's identity. He was convicted of escape and kidnapping, and received an additional 10-year prison sentence. As the prisoner transport vehicle slowly drove away, the light in Adele's eyes dimmed. This meant Frank would now spend 20 years behind bars. During his new sentence, Adele did everything she could, seeking countless lawyers, hoping to clear the charges forced upon Frank. But without exception, all she received were stern warnings. The lawyer's sharp words pushed Adele into a painful dilemma. After endless struggle and torment, she finally chose to let go. But this was by no means an abandonment of that emotion. Adele continued to visit Frank regularly and often sent him letters filled with affection and care. But Frank didn't want to become the obstacle to Adele's happiness. He hoped she would forget him and pursue the life she deserved. That's why he kept rejecting her. In the end, those 3 days they shared were beautiful and unforgettable, yet ultimately just a fleeting illusion. Time moved steadily forward, and Henry thrived under the fatherly love Frank had given him. With the baseball skills Frank taught him, he became a key player on his school team. And thanks to the tire-changing technique Frank once showed him, he met the love of his life. 20 years later, he had grown from a boy into a grounded and dependable young man. Using the fruit pie recipe Frank had taught him, he opened a wildly successful bakery. As Frank's release date approached, Henry received a letter from prison.
I hope you will remember me. We once spent Labor Day weekend together. 5 of the best days of my life. I had always wondered who you would become and what you would look like. And then, one day, I came across a familiar-looking pie. And there you were.
In that letter, Frank made a vow. This time, he would never let Adele's heart break again. If fate would allow, and if Adele was still free, he begged Henry to let them meet once more. Henry knew his mother had waited in that house for 20 long years, holding out hope for Frank's return. She never once stepped away, for fear that if he came back, he might not find his way home. For so long, Adele and Frank had lived in prisons of longing, sustained only by their unwavering hope. On one side, a love that never faded. On the other, a bridge of steadfast belief. At last, after weathering the storms of life, fate brought them together once more. Two hearts, reunited at the end of time. A blurred face gradually became clear until it became the only image in each other's eyes. That simple embrace had been awaited through countless nights and days. Before they met again, they were each shackled by their own emotional chains. And perhaps it was those very chains that tied their destinies together. On their journey through life, they found in each other warmth and hope. Two wounded souls drawing strength from each other's comfort and care, healing together and walking forward hand in hand. True beauty never fades, nor is it ever betrayed. It withstands the test of time, bringing warmth and wonder beyond measure. We mourn the time they lost, but we rejoice that they finally found each other in the end. In this chaotic and complicated world, people vary in so many ways. Some may love many at once, but some will wait a lifetime for just one person. This extraordinary romance, beyond the bounds of convention, not only moved me deeply, it made me believe that true love will always break through every barrier, overcome every obstacle, and shine its brightest in the river of time.